The sound of glass shattering echoed through the marble-floored kitchen of the Alcott mansion, a sound so out of place in its usual silence that it sent a shiver through the air. Eliza froze, a small jar of strawberry jam slipping from her trembling hands. Red spread across the white tile like spilled blood. And just as quickly as the jam hit the floor, the man she feared most appeared in the doorway. "What do you think you're doing?" Mr. Alexander Alcott's voice was cold, cutting, the kind that made even the bravest person hesitate. He stood tall, his tailored suit crisp, his steel-gray eyes filled with irritation. I'm sorry, sir," Eliza stammered, clutching the hem of her apron. "I didn't mean to." His gaze snapped toward the open refrigerator door. The shelves inside were nearly full, expensive imported cheeses, fresh fruits, rare wines, but what caught his attention wasn't what was there. It was what she had taken out, a small sandwich wrapped in foil, half-eaten. "You were checking the fridge?" he said slowly, disbelief mingling with contempt. "Were you stealing from me?" Eliza's eyes widened in panic. "No, sir. I wasn't stealing, I swear, I just—" But he didn't let her finish. "That's enough," he barked. "You're done here. Pack your things and leave. I don't tolerate thieves." She stood still, her lips trembling as tears began to fill her eyes. "Please, sir. I wasn't." "Leave," he said again, this time with finality. And that was it. The billionaire turned and walked away, his expensive shoes echoing down the hall, leaving behind a woman whose world had just collapsed for reasons she couldn't even defend herself from. Eliza sat on the front steps of the mansion an hour later, holding her small bag of clothes and personal things. Her uniform still smelled faintly of lemon polish and detergent. She didn't cry anymore, her eyes were dry, her spirit heavy. She had worked there for 6 months, cleaning, cooking, ironing the billionaire's suits, and keeping his massive home spotless. Never once had she taken anything for herself. Except that day, she had opened the fridge, not to steal, but to check if there was still something left inside the foil-wrapped sandwich she had made for him. She hadn't eaten all morning. Her stomach had growled painfully as she worked, and she'd thought maybe, just maybe, she could eat what he was going to throw away anyway. But fate had caught her in that moment, and now she had nothing left but a small bag, an aching heart, and the shame of being accused of something she didn't do. Inside the mansion, Alexander Alcott poured himself a glass of water, but his hand shook slightly. He wasn't used to emotions, certainly not guilt. Still, something about the look in her eyes haunted him. But he brushed it off. "It's not my problem," he muttered under his breath. "People like her always have excuses." He was used to betrayal. His ex-wife had left him after 10 years, taking half his fortune. His own brother had stolen from the family business. So when someone crossed him, he didn't hesitate to cut them out. That night, though, when he sat in his office overlooking the glittering skyline, the silence pressed on him harder than usual. On his desk sat a picture frame, one of the few personal items he kept around. It was a photo of him as a young boy, maybe 6 years old, standing barefoot next to his mother in a small kitchen. The fridge in the background was empty except for a carton of milk and a jar of pickles. He had come a long way from that life. And maybe, in his success, he had forgotten what it felt like to go hungry. He turned the picture down and told himself it didn't matter. But the next day, he couldn't focus. Every corner of the house reminded him of her, the fresh scent of the sheets she used to change, the way his breakfast was always ready at the same time, the quiet hum of her singing when she thought no one was listening. By the 3rd day, the house felt empty. Not physically, he still had other staff, but there was a strange void, like the life had gone out of the place. Meanwhile, Eliza's situation grew desperate. She lived in a tiny apartment on the city's outskirts with her 7-year-old son, Liam. The boy had been sick for weeks, nothing major, just a persistent cough that refused to go away. But the medicine was expensive, and now, without her job, she didn't know how she'd afford it. That evening, she came home and knelt beside her son's bed. He looked up weakly, smiling despite his pale face. "Did you bring food, Mama?" her heart twisted. She had brought only a loaf of bread and a few apples someone from the bus stop had given her out of pity. "Yes, baby," she said softly, forcing a smile. "We'll eat soon." She turned her face away so he wouldn't see the tears. A week passed. At the mansion, Alexander was having lunch with his business partner, Gerald. Between bites of steak, Gerald chuckled and said, "I heard you fired that maid of yours." "What happened?" Alexander sighed. "She was caught sneaking food from my fridge." Gerald paused. "Really? That doesn't sound like her. I thought you said she was the most hardworking maid you'd ever had." "I don't tolerate dishonesty," Alexander said, though his voice lacked conviction. Gerald shrugged and changed the subject. But later, when the lunch ended, he said something that stuck. "You know, not everyone takes food because they're greedy, Alex. Some do it because they're hungry." That night, those words wouldn't leave Alexander's mind. He found himself in the kitchen again, staring at the same fridge. He opened it, and there, pushed to the back, was the foil-wrapped sandwich. He unwrapped it and found something he hadn't noticed before, a small sticky note stuck inside the foil. It read, in neat handwriting. "For Mr. Alcott. Please eat before 2 p.m. The chicken will go bad otherwise. I'll make another one if this isn't enough. Eliza." He froze. The sandwich she was holding wasn't stolen, it was the one she'd made for him. His stomach sank like a stone. His mind replayed that moment again, her trembling hands, the shock in her eyes, her pleas for him to listen. And he hadn't listened. He sat down heavily, pressing his palms against his face. For the first time in years, Alexander Alcott, the man who prided himself on strength and control, felt his chest tighten with regret. He had accused an innocent woman. The next morning, he called his assistant. "Find out where Eliza Moore lives," he ordered. It took a few hours, but by afternoon, he was standing outside a crumbling apartment building on the city's east side. The smell of damp air and cheap detergent filled the hallways. He knocked on the door. When it opened, Eliza stood there in a faded dress, her eyes hollow from exhaustion. When she saw him, she stiffened. "Mr. Alcott," she said in disbelief. "What are you?" "I need to talk to you," he said quietly. She hesitated, then stepped aside. The inside of her apartment was small but tidy. A single bed, a cracked table, and an old heater humming weakly in the corner. And on the bed lay her son, coughing softly under a thin blanket. Alexander's heart clenched. "Eliza," he began, his voice heavy with guilt. "I made a terrible mistake." She blinked, confused. "That day, when I fired you. I thought you were stealing. But I found your note on the sandwich. You were just doing your job." Her lips parted, but no words came. "I'm sorry," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I was wrong. Deeply wrong." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "You don't need to say that, sir. I understand. People like me, we don't get the benefit of the doubt." He shook his head. "No. You don't deserve to be treated that way. Not by anyone. Especially not by me." There was silence for a moment, broken only by the child's faint cough. Alexander looked at the boy, then back at Eliza. "Is he sick?" he asked. She nodded. "Just a cough. But I can't afford the medicine anymore." Without a word, Alexander took out his phone and made a call. Within minutes, his driver arrived with a doctor he personally summoned. The doctor examined Liam, prescribed medicine, and assured them it wasn't serious, but if left untreated, it could worsen. Alexander paid for everything. Eliza stood by the door, stunned. When the doctor left, Alexander turned to her. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "But please, come back to work. Not as a maid. As my housekeeper and personal assistant, if you'll accept." She shook her head, speechless. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said softly. "Let me make it right."